Welcome back in Live Now from Fox. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. And for that, as always, we turn to national security analyst and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer. As always, Hal, it's good to see you. Let's get straight into the news. Let's talk about the ceasefire negotiations specifically. It's now been over 3 weeks since President Biden announced the latest three-tiered proposal. The AP says that Hamas has accepted the broad outline of the plan but requested amendments. So, Hal, do we know how mediators are even communicating with Hamas leadership within Gaza? How is Yahya Sinwar, for example, adding his input?
Well, that's a good question. One of the things that came up on this initially was the Israelis released what appeared to be a communications intercept with Yahya Sinwar. And part of that, of course, was saying that he thought he had the Israelis right where he wanted them, that Hamas was winning the war. And this was about 3 weeks ago that this was all released. And it kind of showed his mindset. But I have to say, to Hamas, it showed that their communications with Yahya Sinwar had been compromised. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for them to effectively communicate with them. Or if they do communicate with them, they just have to realize, if it's electronic, certainly, that its communications are being monitored by the Israelis, whether that's Mossad, the IDF, Shin Bet, one of their Israeli intelligence services. And so that makes for a very difficult discussion. You can try and talk in code, but then again, anybody can figure out that code after enough time. So it is difficult to do that. Now, the problem they're having with the discussion right now is that essentially Hamas doesn't really have anywhere to go. The Israelis will not let them ever return to power. They're not going to let them ever be a military force again. There has been some discussion about forcing all the Hamas fighters to leave the region, which is akin to what happened in Lebanon. If you want to go back to 1982 with the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, with Yasser Arafat, same thing. They forced him to leave the immediate region. So that's being discussed. But they're really, the other side is that they end up spending time in what's indefinite detention in Israel, some sort of prison arrangement. So Hamas, let's just say they don't have a whole lot of incentive to do this. And if they're looking at this, they're saying, okay, so we do the ceasefire, and even if it becomes a permanent ceasefire, part of the terms of whatever would be more permanent would be pretty much the end of Hamas. And so it's a very difficult dialogue, if you will. Now, obviously, they're still using the same channels. They're talking to the Hamas representatives in Qatar, and you have the Egyptians involved, the U.S. involved, other regional players involved with that discussion. So it is still this indirect thing to the Qataris, to Hamas. But there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm just not holding my breath at this point. They say there's, they have a counter proposal with minor sticking points, but I'm still seeing some pretty big gaps. Those sticking points are some core issues that are different between what Israel sees as acceptable and what Hamas sees as acceptable.
I'm curious about Sinwar. Have we heard anything about the latest on the search for him, where his whereabouts could be? Obviously, we have no public information to say where exactly he is, but have we heard anything from the IDF as of late?
They haven't said anything about it. Now, they wouldn't say anything, and you have to remember, they're in a war. And if they find Sinwar, they're not going to say anything. They're going to try and figure out a way to take him out. He is under the international laws of war, he is about as valid a command and control target as you're ever going to get. And he's also a bona fide terrorist. So under multiple statuses, he is a target, a legitimate target for them to eliminate any way they can. And so if they do find him, I would expect the first thing they would say is that they had eliminated him, had taken him out of the equation. The thing with Sinwar is it's believed that he's somewhere deep underground in the tunnel complexes, assuming that he has not escaped the Gaza Strip. That's something that's been floated around every once in a while, that he may have somehow snuck out of there. But I think the most probable thing is he's ensconced deep underground, and they're just working their way in. Don't know where. Khan Yunis. There was a lot of discussion that he might still be in the Khan Yunis area. And of course, there was a lot of speculation that he had moved down to Rafah. Israel or the IDF has not eliminated all the Hamas positions in Rafah. They're still working on that. So it's very possible he could be holed up in one of the positions that Hamas still holds, but we don't know. And that of course makes communication with him a lot harder for the Hamas representatives as well.
Yeah, and that brings up another interesting thing for me. You mentioned the idea of eliminating him completely. Is there any chatter? Is there any reason to take him alive?
I'm sure if there was some way to take him alive, they would look at it. I would say that certainly when they're looking at the threat assessment of trying to take him alive, you have to remember he'll probably do the same thing that other terrorists have done. You know, strap on a suicide vest or something like that, which means that he probably won't allow himself to be taken alive. And if you recall, when Navy SEALs went in to take out Osama bin Laden, that he brandished a weapon and basically resisted any attempt to take him alive, and of course they had to deal with him with deadly force. And I fully anticipate that will probably happen with Yahya Sinwar, with one difference. I don't anticipate that there will ever be one of these Hollywood moments where they burst through the door and he's standing there and caught off guard. I think what it'll be is they'll figure that he's somewhere deep underground, and they will use some sort of kinetic force, bunker buster bombs or something like that to try and bring the whole world down on him. That would be the most efficient way to do it. And based on how the intelligence would roll out, that would be probably the most likely scenario.
Yeah, and I remember there being a number of reports over the past few months that it's very possible there could be hostages surrounding him as well. Let's move on. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari this week cast Israel's war aim of eradicating Hamas as unattainable, appearing to underscore tensions between Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and top defense officials over his handling of the war in Gaza, according to the Times of Israel. I know you saw this, Hal. Hagari said the business of destroying Hamas and making Hamas disappear is simply throwing sand in the eyes of the public. What have other Palestinian parties like Fatah, for example, said about Hamas's future in Gaza post-war? Do they believe it's possible to eliminate Hamas?
Well, Fatah and the Palestinian Authority are basically they're organizations that have worked together in the past, but generally they're considered two different organizations, and certainly the Palestinian Authority sees itself as the replacement, if you will, for and they see themselves the only legitimate representative of the Palestinians as well, but certainly a replacement for Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So, but they also recognize that there is tremendous appeal ideologically, philosophically to Hamas in that area. And that's basically what Rear Admiral Hagari was talking about. And I should say he talks every day, from what I understand, to the IDF chief of staff. He is their principal spokesperson that basically explains where the IDF is. He's very smart, certainly very articulate in terms of explaining some of the complexities of the battlefield situation. I've just been thoroughly impressed with his briefings all along. So he is explaining that, look, you're fighting an ideology, you're fighting an idea, you're fighting a political movement, and basically what they were saying, and this is essentially the IDF saying, is you have to have an alternative for the Palestinian people, which is no different than what Benny Gantz was saying, no different than what the United States has been saying, and certainly all the regional allies, which is you have to have a viable alternative politically, a governing alternative, something that the Palestinian people can rally around as an alternative concept. This goes to the day after. You know, what happens the day after the end of major combat operations? And what he's saying is, look, you can't just destroy kinetically. That's the problem that Netanyahu has. Once he ascribes to a new government, if you will, for the Palestinians, implicitly, it's going to be a government that can lead to a sovereign status for the Palestinians, not the status quo, but something they're going to have to do, which goes to the two-state solution or some sort of sovereign state solution involving the Palestinians. And that's where his coalition will simply break down. He's got a far-right coalition. He's got a couple of ministers who have made it very clear that once he makes that step, they cross the political Rubicon as far as they're concerned. They're going to pull out of the coalition. His coalition will collapse. Now, there is a more moderate party that could backstop him for a while, saying they will stop an immediate collapse. But at some point, he knows they're going to pull out of that coalition because they just disagree with him so strongly on a number of things. So they might backstop him for a period of time just to get the agreement in place and then let the coalition fall, which goes right to what the protesters on the streets in Israel are calling for, which is a new election and for Netanyahu to step down. So this is he's in a between a rock and a hard place politically in terms of what he does. But the fact the IDF has opened up what is probably one of the biggest rifts, certainly in terms of the fundamental impact, probably one of the biggest rifts of this entire conflict within the body politic of Israel, cannot be understated. This is huge. This adds wind to the sails, certainly of those who are saying, "Look, Netanyahu's got to go." And one thing about the IDF I should mention is it is much more tied into Israeli society than some militaries in other countries, simply because of its size, also because they have national conscription. Everybody serves. So that everybody has, even if they're not part of the reserves or the active forces, there is some strong connection with the Israeli Defense Forces that every Israeli feels, and certainly that every IDF soldier or airman or sailor feels as well with Israel as a whole. And that's a little bit different than you see in some other countries of the world, to include our own.
Yeah, the video we were looking at just a moment ago is something that we've become accustomed to seeing on Saturdays. We see these anti-government protests taking place largely in Tel Aviv is where we get these feeds from, this one coming from the Associated Press this evening. Hal, I also want to talk about Hezbollah, of course, another big story we've been following this week. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Friday that he's profoundly concerned by escalating tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, saying that one rash move or one miscalculation could trigger a catastrophe that goes far beyond the border and, frankly, beyond imagination. That's his quote. So, Hal, what type of miscalculation could we be talking about here? A miscalculated strike, a miscalculated intelligence, some other unwritten rule in this war? What could actually spark something much bigger that we've all been concerned about?
Austin, it's possible that you could see a miscalculation in intelligence. It could be something comes out that they look at and they say, okay, for example, Israel could say, okay, Hezbollah is going to launch, and it could be a mistake. Hezbollah has, about 150,000 missiles that they could potentially employ. It could simply overwhelm the Iron Dome system and literally cause massive damage, destruction, fires throughout all the urban areas. In fact, throughout all of Israel because of what they have. And this is something that everyone's concerned could happen, a scenario they saw last October into early November, and then became clear that Hezbollah really wasn't leaning in that direction to go into major warfare. But Israel is doing strikes up north on a regular basis. Hezbollah is doing stuff to the south on a regular basis. This is picked up in the operational tempo on both sides. And at some point, there could be a decision by either Hezbollah or the IDF that it's time to push this forward. Now, with that, this week, Netanyahu made it clear that they had completed plans for going into southern Lebanon to fight Hezbollah, that the IDF had completed its operational plans to do so. Well, that's a pretty strong statement as far as intent or possible intent to do so. Certainly, I think the reason they put that out there, if you completed the plans, you normally wouldn't say it publicly unless, of course, you're doing it for political intent, and that is to deter Hezbollah from continuing what it's been doing, striking positions south of the border. Hezbollah did not pick up on that cue and stop its attacks across the border. So that is one of the reasons you see Secretary Gutierrez looking at this, making it very clear that he sees this as really on a razor's edge as far as which way it will go. And I would say if I was certainly a commander of any of those United Nations peacekeeping forces on the border, I would be closely reviewing my evacuation plans for my force to figure out how I'm going to get out of there should this thing turn into a full shooting war with mechanized units and everything else coming through the border. And those peacekeepers are in a very difficult position on any given day. And it's not uncommon that the peacekeepers sometimes are injured or killed just in some of the back and forth that goes on. That does happen. But they're going to have to look at where they are because at some point their situation becomes untenable. There's no peace to be kept if it turns into a full-on war.
Before we go, I also want to hit on the Houthis. So this week, the Houthis sunk yet another ship in the Red Sea after months of attacks targeting shipping vessels in the region. Authorities say the ship that sank days after an attack by the Houthis, who are also believed to have killed one mariner on board. So Hal, this new escalation comes despite a months-long U.S.-led campaign in the region that has seen the Navy face its most intense maritime fighting since World War II. How is it that we still stand here in the middle of June and these attacks still have not been quelled yet? Why is it so hard to do that?
Well, Austin, it's a difficult target. The Houthis are well ensconced. They've got well prepared positions. They've got their weapon systems and a lot of other things buried underground. And when they do pull them above ground to launch them, we have launched strike missions. The U.S. has and the United Kingdom have to take them out. They recently, I think it was the end of last week, we took out 5 coastal radar systems. That makes it very difficult for them to do things like target the motor vessel Tudor as they did because they can't get the sort of precise data they need to do that type of precision targeting at sea. Hitting a ship at sea is not really that easy. It's pretty difficult to pull that all together. So they wanted to degrade their ability to actually target those ships. Another thing to consider is our carrier task force in there has just been rotated out. There's not a replacement carrier task force. So that's going to take a while to put in place. The big problem with the Houthis is, we can keep hitting them with airstrikes and to some extent missile strikes and trying to put political pressure on them in other ways. But in terms of raw military power, if we want to go in there and take out those sites where they're launching missiles, nothing replaces putting troops on the ground. Nobody's ready to go there yet. And the question would be which troops would go on the ground if they were to do that. And to do something like that would be pulling us into that civil war in ways that we're currently not involved in, nor do we want to get involved in. So you end up having this. It's not exactly what sometimes referred to as whack-a-mole, where something pops up and you take it out. But on the other hand, it is very difficult to get that sort of decisive destruction of their anti-ship capability without doing something a little more concerted on the military realm. And so I'm sure they're looking at all options as far as what can be done, what ordnance could be used, maybe even thinking about special operations capabilities that we currently have not looked at doing, or maybe having allied nations, neighboring nations, or perhaps even the regular Yemeni forces of the regular government assisting them in doing some stuff to help us with this anti-shipping problem posed by the Houthi rebels.
All right, Hal, we appreciate your analysis. As always, we'll talk with you soon. Take care.
Okay, thanks, Austin.
Let's slide away for a quick 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back.